Hello everybody, my name is Michalem, and it's a great honor to meet here in Reykjavik, in Iceland, Hallgrímur Helgason.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking your time, and pleasure to meet you in this beautiful house. What does this location mean for you?
This is the home of the Icelandic Writers Union. I was on the board of that, for I think 4 or 5 years, some 3 years ago.
Okay.
I finished. And so I was here a lot, and then I live in the neighborhood. I live 3 houses up there, so.
How was it when you were young, aspiring writer and artist in the 60s, 70s? How much different was Iceland at that time of your youth from today, 2021?
Well, I always say that Iceland was like a communist state, in a way, an
Really?
East Bloc
really?
state.
Okay.
Because maybe I'm insulting you, but for me it was like that because everything was kind of grey and monotonic, and we were isolated away from the world, and we only had one TV station, one radio station, and one bar in Reykjavik, and one tree downtown, and one man going around town. That was the city life, Everything was so dead, and nothing was allowed. Everything was forbidden. So discotheques and live music outside, no coffee tables on the streets, no cafes. Life was very strict. So then everything changed in the sort of early 90s.
But what made it so traditional and so conservative at that time, when you were young?
It was provincial society. We were just coming out of the dark ages. Life in Iceland was pretty much the same for 1,000 years. Iceland got settled from Norway via Ireland in the 9th century, and then life was pretty much the same. We lived in turf huts, and we had horses, and we had no roads, we had no use for the wheel. So it was like the Stone Age for 1,000 years, and then early 20th century everything changed. The Norwegians came, taught us how to fish herring, and industry built up, and then we became independent in 1944. So we were just coming out of that, When I was young, we were trying to prove ourselves, tell the world that we existed and that we had our own culture, and we were always trying to promote ourselves.
With your book, 101 Reykjavik, somehow this was part of this myth, of this new boom of Icelandic alternative culture, and with music and new life, new lifestyle. What inspired you to write it at that time?
Well, I had been living in America in the late 80s. I was in New York and Boston, and I was trying to make it as a visual artist. And of course, this American culture had a huge impact on me and influence, and I was really influenced by the stand-up comedy and the TV shows and the American way of writing, Bret Easton Ellis and J. McInerney. Those were the hottest young writers in America, and I brought this sort of sensibility to Iceland back when I moved back to Iceland in the early 90s, and then I wanted to write in a similar way, and then I noticed that Reykjavik had changed. It became like a hot spot in Europe, and nightlife was suddenly booming and popular, and Björk had become world famous, and so all the journalists from England and New York were flocking into Iceland, and it was a big surprise for us. But yeah, I wanted to capture this new kind of Reykjavik that didn't exist when I had left 10 years before. So all those pizza places, video rentals, everything that nobody had written about in an Icelandic novel. I wanted to put it all in.
You once told somewhere that Icelanders feel somehow foreign in their own country. And do you feel somehow separated from Icelandic identity, or did you find some way back home? And you mentioned you had to leave first the States, you wanted to something else. Yeah. Then you came back and you stayed somehow.
Iceland was very isolated. It was a provincial society, and if you wanted to do something different and get some influence, you had to go abroad. There was no internet, you had to only magazines were the big thing, reading about the latest trends. But yeah, at the time I was unhappy in Iceland, and I didn't give a damn about our cultural heritage and the sagas and all this culture thing. But with age, I'm more into that, And now I respect our tradition and our literary heritage, and this big thing that we have here. We wrote the first novels in Europe, in the 13th century. So that's a big thing. But still, it always prevails this sort of sense of feeling that you don't really belong to this country, or you're not sure if you like living here. You're not sure if you're going to stay forever. There is always this feeling, I could get away tomorrow, because it's a young country. It was only populated 1,000 years ago, so maybe that's why. So everything is temporary in Iceland. I have the feeling it's like a camping site. All the buildings can, be torn down. And
one of the greatest sentences in this novel, eine Frau bei 1000 Grad, woman by 1,000 degrees, which is now coming out in Czech language as well, in a wonderful translation. This amazing, unforgettable hero, this lady, 80 years old, in the garage with her false Facebook account and a hand grenade in her hand. At one point, she's telling that the older you get, the more childish you get, the more child you discover in yourself. Do you feel when you now get older that there's a child inside of you still?
Yeah, but I have the feeling it's waiting there. I'm not there yet,
yeah, okay,
so I'm only 62.
Sure not.
But when I get to be like 75 or 80, I'm sure I will have my second childhood. When you look at, for example, artworks by painters like Picasso, he ended up like a big child, and going back to sort of childlike painting. So maybe we all end up. We have a saying in Icelandic that twice is an old man is twice a child, or something like that.
You mentioned this booming 90s as some sort of a breakthrough of a new generation of completely new culture and lifestyle. So what really happened at that time? What brought this change? Was it the globalization? Was it this new openness? Was it also influence of the politics, that Iceland became like more part of the global, first of all, European society, but also connection to the US was always very strong? So how would you describe, how do you remember this time? Was it your best time at that point?
Yeah, I think so. In social life was the best at this time. I think when people started to travel, they saw how life was different in other countries. They had cafes and pizzas, and the pizza came to Iceland in 1987, very late. The beer ban was lifted in 1989. That was like our Berlin Wall came down, And after that, everything was sort of sprung to life, All of a sudden, we had 100 bars in Reykjavik. So everything, and suddenly we had 1,000 rock bands. And so I always connect those things to the lifting of the beer ban. So then Reykjavik became alive, Yeah, and it has been like that ever since. But I think it also was that the people in Europe, they sort of discovered Iceland fairly late. And Iceland was very exotic for them, but only 3 hours away by plane. So it was like going to another world, but very close by. So they were amazed by it, and they still are. And for us, it's always a little bit surprising, why people think this is such a great country. For us, it's like really difficult country to live in. The storm yesterday and the avalanches. We had 20 avalanches just in the north part
in
of
October.
Iceland.
We are now in October. Yeah.
No, not yet in October. This is
exactly.
September.
Later September. Yeah.
So you see how difficult it can be.
How would you describe for us your Icelandic publisher? And in which way you would say it's different to be published here than elsewhere where your books are being translated to?
Well, you have a special relationship with your readers here in Iceland. And we have this Christmas book season that starts in October and is all the way until Christmas, and we have this wonderful tradition that people give books for Christmas presents, and at Christmas parties they discuss the latest books, literature, and that's a great tradition, and we hold on dear to that, because it's very important for us financially as well. We sell more books that way. So for us, it's of course the number one market. It's really nice if you get a good reception, if you have the feeling that people are reading your book and liking it and discussing it, and so there's nothing that beats that feeling. Everything else is a bonus. Being published abroad is a bonus.
How would you describe your writing career in a sense of that you developed this very special form of a long novel and this very epic style you have developed with I love your way of storytelling, which is full of humor but also full of tragedy and contradictions of the life, and you always learn so much about the Icelandic history and the society and also controversies, because your heroes are always sometimes messed up with history and so how this evolved, because you said you planned first to become a visual artist only, and then you switch to or you do both on the side. So how would you describe your writing style, if it's possible?
Well, I come from this tradition of telling stories, this Icelandic tradition that comes from all the saga age, and good stories are always being told in Iceland, and you're always most welcome in a new house where you are a guest if you can tell a good story. And so how to tell a good story is you always have to change it a little bit to make it better and have a good punchline at the end. And they're always a little bit similar to jokes. They always have to end with a punchline and everybody laughs. So Iceland's culture is very much about stories, so I am very much influenced by that. And in the beginning, I was only writing comedies. I was making fun of everything, and then gradually you evolve as a person, and you want to tackle more difficult things, and the drama keeps coming in. But at the same time, I studied Shakespeare. I translated two of his plays, and I noticed that he always manages to keep the comedy with the drama and keep it at the same level at the same time, and I was really blown away by that. So I always think about that when I'm writing. You're allowed to make a joke even though somebody just died. Everything can be funny, and this is also our tradition from the sagas. They're full of black humor, So. But the trick is to blend those things together, to invest, to let the reader invest in the book and really feel for the characters, but at the same time have a little bit distance so we can joke about it. And then you can also, with historical novels, you have to do research. And I learned that maybe from painting. For example, here is one of my paintings. So I can paint for sometimes in a realistic style, and then you always have to do the research. You have to take, have to make things realistic. You have to, if you want to paint this bottle, you have to study the bottle and where are the highlights and what are the colors and how is the reflection, and you have to find a way to put that on canvas, and that's similar. In writing a historical novel, you have to study the facts and try to include them in the story, but make them interesting. I always have this theory that you have to write about the facts as if they were, and make them look like fiction, and you have so they are fun to read, and you have to write about fiction as if it was fact, so the reader will believe in your story. So you have to blend all those things together, and it's hard to explain.
Thanks for this little masterclass. And I would just ask, we come from small cultures and small languages like Slovak and Czech, and we always complain like everybody knows everybody in the scene. So when we were flying to Reykjavik, we were thinking like, well, now this is going to be even much more problematic maybe here. How is it to be an artist, to be a creative person on such a small scale, in such a small scene as here? in Iceland?
It has its ups and downs, you know, because it's we have a lot of amateur writing and amateur artists, and you know, because it's so easy to get published, so easy to get an opportunity in any artistic field. But it's also all the distances are very short, you know. When I lived in Paris and New York, it felt like, you know, those cities feel like some dinosaurs. You know, just going to your friend's house takes 1 hour by train, and everything is moves so slowly. And you know, Reykjavik is like a small phone. You know, it's like smartphone. Everything's easy. If you want to go to the theater, you can leave 5 minutes before it starts, and everything is like that. You know, very accessible and user-friendly, just like the smartphone. And so, being an artist like me, you know, I'm in many fields. You know, I write articles for the newspapers. I have artistic shows, you know, visual art, and then I'm writing books, and then I give readings and write for the theater. And so everything is within
different
reach.
scenes.
Yeah, and so it's easy to cross over from one scene to another. But I have the feeling that you cannot really do that in America, or then you have to focus on one thing.
In the middle of Europe, in the last couple of years, we have lots of discussions about future of financing of culture, about cultural funding. Do you think that a lot of, from what you mentioned, this very lively scene in so many fields here in Iceland, was a lot of it made possible by state support?
Yeah, it's absolutely. I mean, the grant system in Iceland is very good, and that's basically what we thrive on, you know. I get a monthly salary from the state, and I've had that for like 10 years, you know. So I'm able to concentrate on the work itself. I don't have to have a side job in an advertising agency or something like that. So there's no distraction. But some people complain that there is, you know, there is no urgency anymore. That you have to write a book like and make it sell, and it has to be a very. It makes the literature more like edgy or something, but instead of being too comfortable. But I don't believe in that theory. It's always difficult to write, and so you always have to have a lot of time to concentrate on your books, for example. And so I don't think I'm affected by this this grant system, but I think this is the key to our thriving literature culture.
We mentioned the early 90s. Now we are in the year 2021. Next year we hope to host you at the festival, Months of Authors Reading in Middle Europe, in Ostrava, Brno, Bratislava, maybe some other cities when COVID situation will allow it. How would you describe the current situation in Iceland? Is it on the right track after the election, after the new political development?
Well, I was not happy with the election, outcome of the election, because I think the politicians are always behind now. The culture is moving up very fast, and we are in connection with other cultures. We are cosmopolitan. We are cutting edge. We are doing good things, but politicians are always lagging behind. They are more conservative, and they don't keep up with the current situation. So, for example, the system, the voting system itself is a fraud, and it's like too old for this modern time. And we have voted for a new constitution in 2012, and it was people were for it. Like 70% of the people voted for the new constitution, but the parliament has not listened to that. So we had our own Brexit referendum in 2012, and just the politicians ignored it, and that's really terrible. And it's a bad sore on our political life. And so I think we have to update the political parties in the system and vote for some more progressive things. Well, we have to wait for 4 years now.
I don't know if you're aware of this, but when we were children in Czechoslovakia in late 80s, we were watching this meeting of Gorbachev and Reagan in Reykjavik. We were really fascinated, black and white television. And for us, it was like the world is changing somehow. There is something, and nobody knew where Reykjavik is. It was for us like a big mystery. What is this place, you know? And Gorbachev in his submarine, and all this surreal setting, you know. And today I saw the house where this happened, and it was some sort of a very strange feeling for me that this is all real. And do you still remember this event, which maybe for us ended the Cold War and this separation of the Eastern Europe?
It was a historical thing. It was the beginning of the end,
Yeah.
you know, and so the first sort of sign of ending the Cold War. So it started all there in Höfði House, and I was not in Iceland at the time, but of course this was a big thing, and everybody talked about it for ages, and you can still see the house, and so we were really proud of this whole thing, that we hosted this event, this historical event.
Mr. Helgason, we are very much looking forward to read you in Czech language as well, and we hope to have you as our guests next year in summer, in July.
I'm looking forward to coming.
In Czech Republic and Slovakia. Thank you so much for talking to us. Thank you so much.